Hi, this is Krishnan. I'll be handling the Hindu news analysis for the day. So, these are the 5 topics that we are going to see. Let us now straight away go into the news analysis. The first topic for the day is how the Office of Registrar General of India is following absolute criteria to define scheduled tribes. What is absolute? Absolute means it is no longer useful because something better has been invented. So, who defines ST status in India? It is the Office of the Registrar General of India. And how does it define? It defines the criteria set by the Lokur Committee. So, what is this Lokur Committee? It was set 60 years ago and it defines any new community to be brought into the scheduled tribe fold. So, the Office of the Registrar General of India's nod is mandatory for the inclusion of any community in the ST list. But ST tribe, how we are coming to that conclusion? That is through the report of the Advisory Committee on the Revision of the List of Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes, that is primarily the Local Committee, which was set up in 1965. So, if you want to set some community as ST, what you should do? You should look into the criteria that is set by the Local Committee. But what has happened is Parliament itself is now considering a proposal to change the criteria. Why? Because they are saying these criteria are obsolete, that is, it is old and no longer useful. Condescending. Condescending means to think that we non-tribals are better than tribals. And dogmatic. What does dogmatic mean? That is, only our views are correct and others' views are not right. That is dogmatic. And rigid. That is, you cannot change it or it is not flexible. So the parliament itself knows what Lokur said in Lokur committee has got these limitations. Now let us see what are the criteria that Lokur said initially in 1965. He says if you want to identify a community as a ST, they should fulfill the following criteria. What are the criteria? They are indications of primitive traits, distinct culture, geographical isolation, shyness of contact with the community at large, backwardness. So these 5 criteria is telling, but people now feel these are not useful, condescending and dogmatic. So what the government now feels that these criteria will not help them identify who real STs are and who are not. So why? Because now there is process of transition and acculturation. Transition means there is a change in how people live. Few people are in tribal areas, few people are in urban area, so the transition has taken place. And acculturation, which means tribals do not wholly follow their culture, they are in contact with other culture people also, so they might have taken some sort of culture from them also. So these things have happened. So what Lokura said, we cannot follow them. So next thing is, you cannot tell they are primitive. If you tell a tribe is primitive, it not necessarily be primitive for them. So they are telling this is condescending. What you think primitive might not be primitive for tribals. So they are telling don't tell primitive, tribals are primitive, don't keep that criteria like that, they are telling. Next is, Lokur is telling have geographical isolation as criteria. But you think we have a lot of infrastructure schemes, we are building roads, bridges and things like that. How can any community remain isolated from the rest? Of course, there's gonna be no geographical isolation in 2022. So these things you should consider. Now what the government has done, it has come with new criteria. Now let us see those criteria one by one. So the first thing is socio-economic. There should be socio-economic backwardness, including educational, with respect to the rest of the population of the state. Next thing is historical geographical isolation, which may or may not exist today. Next is distinct language or dialect. Next is presence of a core culture relating to life cycle, marriage, songs, dance, paintings and folklore. Finally, endogamy, or in case of exogamy, marital relationship primarily with other STs. This criteria for scheduling of a community as ST are not for determining SC status of an individual. This is only for tribes. For example, if an individual goes and marries outside his tribe, or if he marries non-STs, these criteria will not apply. Next thing is we discuss something called as acculturation. Due to that acculturation, a lot of tribes follow the Hindu way of life. So if a tribe follows Hindu way of life, you cannot tell they are not tribals. So even if the tribe follows Hindu way of life, they are eligible for ST status. So the next thing is, while according ST status, the population of the new community with respect to the overall ST population of the state will also be considered. So there should be parity, right? So when a community is asking for ST status, their population and other ST population in the state will be looked into. Now, these are the new criteria that the government has come up with. What are the other issues with regard to identification of STs and Register General of India is this Register General of India, it does not have expert anthropologists and sociologists to identify scheduled tribes. And as usual, we do not have proper data with respect to scheduled tribes. Next, we are relying on census publications which are inconsistent. Let's see, over the years, the census, no, it has defined tribes in a very confusing way. So let us have a look. For example, in the 1891 census, tribes are just defined as people with tribal religion. In 1901 and 1911 census, it described them as tribal animists. Animists are people who worship spirits. In 1921, they were called hill and forest tribes. In 1931, they were documented as primitive tribes. In 1941, they were just classified as tribes. Finally, in 1951, you have had this term called scheduled tribe, which was given by the constitution. So, over the years, there has been a lot of confusion with regard to how you define and identify scheduled tribes. So, what we now understand is the criteria to identify STs are cumbersome. Because of this criteria, close to 40 communities are not given ST status yet. But what the government is doing is, in spite of knowing the limitations of these criteria, the government has put on hold the change of procedure and it has continued to go ahead with the old procedure, which is what the RJ will be following. That is the local committee recommendations and the census publications. So because of this, again, tribals will be at disadvantage. So these are the things that you should know, that Registrar General of India is one of the authorities who will give nod to the ST status. How do they define STs? Through local committee. And what are the problems there we saw in this article. Now let us move on to the next article. In this article, former foreign secretary talks about what we should expect from the G20 summit, which is going to happen in India, and what is our agenda with respect to G20. Since we are having the presidency for this G20, what is India's agenda with respect to G20? Let us go into the topic. So, as you all know, this is the first time we are going to host the G20 summit, and of course, we are not sure if Russian President Putin is going to come. But after this, in June, we are going to have SCO, that is the Shanghai Cooperation Summit in June. For that, Putin, he is sure is going to come, but for G20, it is not sure whether he is going to come or not. So, people keep asking us if this person is going to come or not, or that person is going to come or not. So, what India is saying is we will focus on the substance of G20 rather than on symbolism. So, what matters to us is what outcome we are going to get through G20 and not on simple symbolisms. So, this you should know. And what India says is we focus on G20 as a group and we want to achieve solutions that are much needed in the world today. Next thing is, so before any summit starts, there will be a lot of issues, and we'll see what are the issues that will be faced in the G20 summit. First thing is obviously the Ukraine-Russian war, and because of this, there is a lot of debts for developing countries. Why? Because of the war, revenues have gone down for these countries. Import bills for food and fuel has increased, that you know, obviously, because oil prices have soared. That is one thing. And decrease international demand for goods and services. Next thing is lower remittances and reduction in income. Reduction in tourism earnings. That is because of war, a lot of tourists have stopped coming. And as you know, close to 90 countries are on the verge of indebtedness. So what does India stand with regard to all these things? India says our prime importance is peace and stability. And this is not an era of war. Whatever problem you have, we'll have to find a solution through diplomacy and dialogue, and no war, only peace. This is what India's stand is with regard to these issues. So this is what G20 issue is and the agenda for G20. So in prelims, they might ask you questions on G20. So let us briefly have a look on how G20 is formed, what are the structure of it. First thing is G20 is an informal group with 19 countries and European Union. You should know that G20 is not G20 countries. It is 19 countries plus one organization, which is European Union. It has a mix of world's largest advanced and emerging economies, that is both developed and developing economies will be there. It came into existence during the 2008 financial crisis. So why did it come? Because after the 2008 financial crisis, the world leaders decided that we need consensus building at the highest political level. So all the political heads of the developed and developing countries should meet at least once in a year. Like that they decided. So G20 came into existence. So have a look at this map. As you know, these are the G20 countries. Look at it, how many countries are part of it. A lot of important countries are part of it, and you have guest countries also. So this map shows it. So this you should know, all the 20 countries of the G20 you should know. I'm not going to read them, but you pass and have a look at it. Next thing that you should know is Spain is not a member, but it is a permanent invitee. This they might ask as a prelims question, that is Spain is not a member but a permanent invitee. And next thing that you should know is G20 does not have a permanent secretariat or a headquarters. That is, which country that is hosting the presidency, that country will be the headquarters or secretariat, like that. So no permanent secretariat or headquarters. And one term that you should know with regard to G20 is there's something called Troika. That is, every year one new country will take presidency, right? So there will be one country preceding and one country will be succeeding. So those three countries will come together and work hand in hand so that there will be continuity with regard to issues and agenda. So this term is called Troika. So this you should know with respect to G20. Next we'll go to the third news article for the day, which is about the conflict between the governor and the elected government in Tamil Nadu. Let us see what the issue is. So what happened is we saw unprecedented scenes in Tamil Nadu legislature assembly. What happened is the government asked Governor Ravi to read a paragraph, but you know what happens in the legislative assembly, right? In the first session of the year, the governor will come and read. But what happened is here the governor Ravi, he refrained from reading certain terms. What are those terms? There was mention about national and regional leaders like Anna, Periyar, and Kamaraj. So the governor refused to read these terms, and he also did not use the word Dravidian model of government. And immediately, what the chief minister did is he responded through a solution that said the house would record whatever the speech that was given to the governor and not what the governor decided to omit. So, how he could do this? He could do this under Rule 17. So, governor speech was not recorded as it was done, and it was recorded how it was given by the Tamil Nadu government. So, when the governor came to know about this, while the chief minister was speaking, the governor walked out of the assembly. So, this is the issue that is going on in Tamil Nadu. So, is this new in our country? No. In the past, we have had a lot of issues like that. In February 1965, the then West Bengal governor Padmaja Naidu walked out of the assembly without addressing the house because the opposition kept interrupting her. Recently, even in the 90s, Tamil Nadu CM Jayalalitha had a lot of issues with the Governor Chenna Reddy, and the conflict went on for years. So, as you know, this is not a new thing. This is going on in a country for a very long time. And there are other issues as well. First thing is the governor always uses the term Tamilagam and not Tamil Nadu. So what happened is Congress and Vidudalai Sirithaigal Katchi objected to this. They said, don't tell Tamilagam, tell Tamil Nadu. Like that, they sloganade against the governor. But if you look at historically, Tamil Nadu has been called Tamilagam and Tamil Nadu. Both ways, Tamil Nadu has been called. So, because of this term, there is no issue. Even 100 years ago, the Provincial Congress Committee of the then Madras state was called Tamil Nadu Congress Committee only. So, what happened, right? Only in 1968, the Madras state came to be called as Tamil Nadu. Before that, there was a lot of issues on how to name it. In 1961, a person named C. Subramaniam, he was an important member in Kamaraj cabinet, and he said, in Tamil you call the state as Tamil Nadu, and English you call the state as Madras. But what happened is, in 1968, the Madras State Alteration of Name Act 1968 was passed, through which the state's name was changed to Tamil Nadu. You know, right? If a state wants its name changed, it should first pass a resolution in its own state legislative assembly, and then the parliament will pass an act regarding it. So this is how the name of Tamil Nadu was changed. So after that, what happened? This happened during the tenure of Arinyar Anna or C.N. Annadurai, who was the last CM of the Madras state and the first CM of Tamil Nadu. So this name change happened in 1968. There are other issues as well. You know what happened after the DMK came to power? They started using the term Ondriya Arasu, which means union government. Before that, the term Madhya Arasu was used, which means central government. So the governor is telling you should call us Madhya Arasu, that is central government only, and not union government. And a lot of bills are pending before the governor. The legislative assembly has passed a lot of bills, but the governor is not giving approval. So those issues are going on. So finally, we should conclude saying people are hoping that tension should not escalate further, because if there is conflict between the executive themselves, between the elected head and the selected governor, there will be governance problem in the state. So the people, their welfare should be kept in mind, and governance should be given top priority. So that is what this issue is about. Let us now move on to the next article, which talks about how China is trying to buy oil and gas from Taliban, and how there are a lot of issues associated with it. Let us see it. So recently there was a $540 million deal between Xinjiang Central Asia Petroleum and Gas Company and the Taliban. This will give access to a river called Amu Darya to China, and this is the first major economic win for the Taliban. On the right side of the screen, you can see the Amu Darya basin, and you can see the countries through which it flows. Let us briefly look at the river. So historically it was called River Oxus. It forms the northern border of Afghanistan and has borders with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Earlier it used to drain in the Aral Sea, and it forms the boundary between Karakum Desert and the Kizilkum Desert. It loses much of its water in the Turan Plain, and it is dammed across its flow to provide irrigation to the desert part. So what are China's aims and challenges in the region? Basically, China wants to keep Western countries out of China. China wants to keep Western countries out of Afghanistan and Central Asia. But now, as you know, Russia has invaded Ukraine. So Russia is around the Central Asian region, and because of that, USA is also into the picture. Except Tajikistan, all other neighboring countries have accepted the legitimacy of Taliban. Why? Why did they do this? Because they want to avoid conflict with Taliban, and now they are focusing on regional cooperation with Taliban's Afghanistan. So, what are China's security concerns in the region? China is the most visible foreign power in Afghanistan. Why? Because it has hosted multiple Taliban delegations. A lot of Taliban leaders have come to China, Beijing, and they have had a lot of meetings. So, what does China want from Taliban? It wants Taliban to act against Uyghur led militant groups which are operating from Afghanistan territory. What is the militant group called? It is called the Turkestan Islamic Party, which targets China sitting from Afghanistan. So, China wants Afghanistan to take action on these militant groups. However, Taliban is not fully cooperating here with China. Next thing is, what are the economic aims and threats to China? China wants to create a China Pakistan Afghanistan axis because Pakistan is very important for its Afghanistan plan, because Pakistan is a part of the Belt and Road Initiative and the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. But what has happened? Things are not going as expected by the Chinese. Why? What has happened? Because only if Taliban and Pakistan are on the same page, China can use both of them. But recently, what has happened? There is conflict between Taliban and Pakistanis. Why? They are fighting over a group called Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is wreaking havoc in Pakistan. So there is conflict between them. And what has happened of late? We've seen Chinese nationals, and their assets are targeted in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. So these issues are going on the sidelines. What is happening? China's poor record, right, of dealing with Islam as a religion, society, and culture. Because we saw what Chinese army and the Chinese government is doing to Uyghur Muslims. They are demolishing their mosques. They are putting them in concentration camps. Because of this, Chinese are attacked in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And what has happened? Even Pakistan's own strategy in Afghanistan is failing. So China has lost grip over Afghanistan. So this is worrying China because it has made a lot of investments in Afghanistan. But what does the Taliban want? First of all, Afghans live in terrible economic and social conditions because Taliban has implemented regressive policy like disallowing women's education, women should not go to work, and things like this. Because of that, there is a prolonged economic depression. If this continues, it will change the authority of the current regime. So the current regime is scared and it wants to establish a successful Islamic emirate. So what it must do to achieve this, it needs a functional economy to fund not only the state, but it has a lot of functions within the Taliban fold. So they should also get money, people should also get money. So for that, they want a proper functional economy. So that one thing is there. On the other hand, if it does not have a proper functional economy, what will happen? International community will further go away from Afghanistan, and this will put a lot of stress on Afghanistan and its people and its economy. But one more thing is, within Taliban there are a lot of factions, right? But what has happened? This economic vision of some in the Taliban who negotiated with the West as well as Haqqanis, it is different from the main ideology of Taliban. Who represents that ideology? It is its leader. His name is Hibatullah Akhundzada. So, but in spite of all this, even if the economic fails, they are not worried about it because they are telling they will not make ideological concessions to make economic gains. So all these things are making things difficult for China. So the real question before China is, are we ready to economic lift the Taliban regime all by ourselves in exchange for natural resources? This should be a very tough question for China to answer because China's past track record shows it's always not successful in running businesses in political volatile regions. So it is running business in politically volatile regions like Africa. There it is not successful. And so far it was leaning on Pakistan to have some leverage over Pakistan. But now Pakistan itself is economically unstable and facing a lot of severe political and strategic issues. So now China is very careful on how it is engaging with Afghanistan and Pakistan. So China should be very careful, or it will become another footnote in the graveyard of empires history. What do you mean by graveyard of empires? It means whoever fought with Afghanistan, like the Anglo-British War, First War, Second War, Third War, or the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, or the US fighting the war or terror in Afghanistan, they all lost against Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. So this author is telling China should be careful, or it will become the graveyard of empire. So this is what this article is about. It talks about what are China's interests in the Afghanistan and Central Asian region, and what Pakistan role is, and what are the threats are there in that region. Let us now go to the final article of the day. It talks about a very, very important issue. As you all know, there are a lot of infant mortality rate which is very high in India. So the author gives us a lot of data and tells us what is the way forward to overcome all these problems. So how do we get all this data? Two new reports have come on child mortality. One is called the levels and trends in child mortality. That is one report, and the next report is never forgotten. It is prepared by United Nations Interagency Group for Child Mortality Estimation. It gives very shocking revelations about the situation of child mortality in India and around the globe. We'll compare it with the globe and see how things fare in India. First, it states globally 5 million children died before their 5th birthday. That is the under 5 mortality. Of this, that is 2.7 million occurred among children aged 1 to 59 months. That is close to 1 to 4.5 years. Reminder, 2.3 million children died just in the first month of their life. That is called neonatal deaths. If a child dies within 4 weeks, that is within 28 days, it is a neonatal death. So in that, let us see India's share. India had 7,09,366 under 5 deaths, 5,86,787 infant deaths, that is death before first birthday, and 4,41,801 neonatal deaths, that is before 28 days. And through the sample registration system survey, we find there's a lot of regional imbalance. For example, for every 1,000 live births, if a child is born in Madhya Pradesh, there was a 6-fold chance for it to die. That is, the infant mortality rate in Madhya Pradesh was 6-fold of the rate in Kerala. Also, there was rural-urban divide. Rural area children have higher mortality rates than urban area children. So, now let us see why is this happening in India. Biologically, how do these children die? They die if they are born too early. That is called preterm birth. What does preterm mean? If they are born alive before 37 weeks of pregnancy, they are preterm. These preterm babies are 2 to 4 times at higher risk of death after birth in comparison to those born after 37 weeks of gestation. So, before 37 weeks, if they are born, they are called preterm births. They are 2 to 4 times at higher risk of dying. So, globally, if you see, 1 out of 10 birth is preterm, but in India, 1 out of every 6 to 7 birth is preterm. So, studies have shown that preterm births contribute to 1 in every 6 under 5 child deaths. So, what we infer from this data is, if a child is preterm birth child, there are very high chances for it to have a child mortal death. First we saw preterm births, now we'll see about stillbirth. What is stillbirth? If a baby dies after 22 weeks of pregnancy but before or during birth, then it is stillborn. So after 22 weeks and before or after birth, that is a stillborn. Globally, 1.9 million stillbirths happen. In India, the number of stillbirths is 2,86,482. And even in this, the death among children in 1 to 59 months of age, it is higher for stillbirths. So, this stillbirth death only is driving the neonatal, infant and child mortality upward. So, you should know preterm births and stillbirths, which is contributing to the increased child mortality in India. Next, we'll see why is this happening in India and why we are not able to stop it. First thing is, we do not have granular and reliable data. What is granular? Granular is like precise if you go inside, and even the smallest of thing is called granular. So we do not have granular data. And data on stillbirths and preterm, they are scarce that you do not get it. Even at the international level, only now we have started getting stillbirth data. That is only from October 2020 we are getting international level itself. This stillbirth now only we are getting. In India, SRS recently came with a stillbirth report, but experts are telling it is not reliable. So what the need of the hour is? The need of the hour is timely granular data on stillbirths from the block, district and state levels. So you should go from block, district, state, that is called granular level. So now we'll see what are the solutions. How do we put an end to this? First, we all know we should increase access to family planning services. We should improve antepartum services such as health and nutrition. What is antepartum? Antepartum is the day you conceive and the day when the child is born. The intervening period is called antepartum. So when a woman is pregnant, you should make sure that her health is right and give her proper nutritious food. Next thing is you should increase the intake of iron, folic acid. Next thing is you should provide counseling on the importance of healthy diet to mothers, pregnant women, that you should do. Optimal nutrition you should give, and identification and management of risk factors. So during pregnancy, what are the risk factors a mother might go under or a pregnant woman might go under? She might get diabetes, hypertension, obesity and infections. So that should be taken care of, and you should take care of future you should also take care of future neurological complications of preterm. So you should also take care of the future neurological complications for preterm babies by ensuring the kangaroo mother care and early initiation of exclusive breastfeeding. So what is kangaroo mother care? A child will be kept in between the chest of the mother, and there will be skin to skin contact throughout for the mother and child. That is called kangaroo mother care. So what is the way forward? We need a lot of data on preterm births and stillbirths, and the maternal and perinatal death surveillance guidelines need to be effectively implemented. What is perinatal? Perinatal means immediately before and after a childbirth. That is called perinatal. So for that you need the death surveillance guidelines. Next, international classification of diseases definition for perinatal mortality must be adopted. So whatever the international classification, that definition you take and adopt for India also, like that they are telling. What will this lead to? This will lead to standardizing the causes of stillbirth reporting. Next, what you should do? Identify the hotspot clusters of stillbirths and preterm babies for local and targeted intervention. So we are going granular. We should see what are the local areas that are hotspots, and we should go and intervene there. And take multi-stakeholder collaboration. Involve a lot of NGOs, state government, central government, doctors. Everybody should come together and find a suitable solution for this. So, but you should do this immediately. Why should we do this immediately? Because our primary healthcare system is underfunded. A lot of children die, but we can easily prevent them from dying. They're all very simple preventable causes, but children are dying because of that. So we should speed up interventions. Pregnant women are still not getting good quality care. So because of this aggregate mortality, we are seeing mortality on a aggregate basis. Because of that, inequities in health outcomes are not seen. So because of this, poorest and the marginalized people suffer. So what should the government do? The government should properly see what is happening in the stillbirth and preterm birth case, because they are tracer indicators, which means if you follow the stillbirth and preterm birth and if you reduce the deaths, It shows the quality of maternal and child health services also. And what the government promised in the 2017 National Health Policy, the government had committed to investing 2.5% of the GDP on health by 2025. Even now, it is only 1.5% of the GDP, which is one of the lowest spending in the world. So, keeping these things in the mind, the government should increase its spending. So, these are the 5 articles that we saw today. Let us go to the practice prelims questions. So, what is the low core committee recently in news famous for? We saw this. It is famous for criteria for identifying STs. Consider the following statements about G20. Its headquarters is in Washington. It has 20 countries as members. Spain is also a member of G20 countries. Which of the following statements are correct? The answer is D, none of the statement, because it does not have a permanent headquarters. It has 19 countries as member, and one member is an organization called European Union, and Spain is a permanent non-member invitee. So these things you should know with regard to G20. Let us go to the mains practice question. Recently, a report on child mortality, that is levels and trends in child mortality, gave shocking revelations about the high prevalence of child mortality in our country. Quoting relevant facts and figures, highlight the dim situation of a country with regard to child mortality and discuss what are the steps that should be taken in the future to avert this. So how you should answer this? The heading could be data that has come in the report. So you can tell what is the infant mortality rate with regard to under 5 neonatal and things like that. And we can tell where we are lagging and what should be the future course of action. You can also quote the national health policy and tell this is the way forward. This is a 15 marker. Use 250 words to write this answer. So this is what it is about for the day. If you like this, you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, and Facebook. That is all for the day. Thank you for tuning in. Bye. Take care.